Hi there, and thank you for tuning in. Today I want to show you how I did a product shoot of the vase just behind me. And the reason why I chose this vase was for two things. One was that I think it has a very good shape. And the other thing is it has a color that quite stands out. I hope you would agree. You notice this color, right? And in this video I'm going to show you a few products, but I'm not sponsored by any of the products I'm showing you here. This example here is a company called Ravi, R-A-W-I. I'll post a link to them. As I said, I'm not sponsored by them. I just think this has a very nice shape and a very nice color. When you select your subjects, I would recommend you in the beginning select something that's relatively simple, has a simple shape. I tried to do my first few shots with a very, very busy flower with a lot of small flower heads, and that didn't fly. It doesn't work. I think this type of photography works the best if you use a simple shape. Other than that, the only thing you need in terms of the scene and the subject is a good subject. You can shoot this anywhere you want to. You can shoot it in your living room, your kitchen, wherever. Wherever you have a little bit of space, that will suffice. Normally I talk about 3 steps. I talk about the scene and the subject, then I talk about the actual shoot and the post-processing. And the first part, we're already done with that. As long as you have selected your subject and you have a kitchen, a living room, whatever, with a little bit of space, you're good to go. So here is a top-down view of the setup I used. At the bottom I have the camera, obviously, subject in the middle, and then a flash both to the left and to the right of the subject. And the idea here is that as I don't have a backdrop, I simply think they take up too much space. I usually try to use light fall off to create a black backdrop. And the only thing you need for that to succeed is that you need some space behind your subject. And then of course you don't want too much light going in that direction. The idea is that when you shoot your flashes from the side of the subject, not only does it help bring out the structure in the subject, but also the advantage is that the light that is reflected over here on the right wall, you can see here this is illustrated with the left flash, but of course it also goes from the right flash on the left wall. But the light that is reflected here, it doesn't really interfere with what your camera sees. And in that way, you can have some light that is reflected without destroying or disturbing the idea to have a black backdrop without actually having a backdrop at all. And I often find that finding a good way to send the light or the light that is reflected is one of the tricky things about flash photography, that often you cast a shadow or you cast some light that you don't want to use. But in this way, shooting both from left and right side of the subject, you can still get a black background and still have a very well lit subject. So I don't know if you know a photographer named Daniel Norton, but he's a US, I think he's even New York based photographer. And in my humble opinion, he is probably one of the best that I have ever seen in setting up flashlight and all sorts of light on a given set. And I can highly recommend his channel. He has his own channel. He's done a lot of work together with Adorama. I will post a link below so you can find it. But he has taught me 2 things I would like to use in this video. The first thing is to sort of kill the ambient light. And the point with that is that you only want your flashes to be the ones that control that give the light. So the ambient light, like for instance, any light bulbs or whatever you have working in your room, rather than sort of switching those off and trying to work in the dark, you can just make your camera settings so that if you take a picture without the flashes, then you get a completely black picture. And typically what you would need to do, I will put this on the screen as I'm talking, but what you typically need to do is to take your base ISO, the shutter speed as fast as possible, say 1/200th of a second. Typically check your maximum shutter sync speed for your particular camera, and then choose an aperture as narrow as possible, but not so much, of course, so you get diffraction. And mind you that the aperture is really where you start to blocking also the light from the flash. So f8 typically I would go for, maybe a little bit higher, but thereabout, and take a test shot without the flashes, switch off the flashes, and then see if you get a completely black frame. In that way, you know that if you do get a black frame, you are then completely in control of the light, and the light only comes from your flashes. The second thing that Daniel has taught me, he has taught me many things, but the second thing I'm going to use in this video that he has taught me is that You can distinguish between hard and soft light. I find this a bit counterintuitive, but actually the closer to your subject you bring the light source, the softer the light gets. And soft just means that the transition from very bright to very dark happens gradually if you have soft light. It happens very abruptly if you have harsh light. Whatever you like, I mean, that's personal preference, of course, and also subject to what the expressions you want to have in your picture. For this shoot, I wanted to have soft light, meaning that I wanted to have the flashes relatively close to the subject, and also that I wanted to have the light here in the flashes take up as big a surface as possible. And to do that, maybe I'm a little bit cheap here, but I have built a softbox myself. I've actually ordered one now. It's in the mail, I guess, but I didn't have one for this shoot, so I just built one. This is a white piece of fabric, a bit of duct tape, and a cardboard box. And of course, obviously, here on the back side, I made a hole so that I can put the flash in here. What I didn't know about flashes, because I'm relatively new to photography, they typically have a little plastic thing you can bring out, and that of course is a diffuser. But what often happens is that when you bring this one out, the flash will automatically go as wide as possible. You can zoom with a flash, so you direct your light. And inside this box here, of course you want the light to fill as much as possible of this area. And the way to do that is to, so to speak, not zoom, but actually go as wide as possible. So if you take down this little plastic thing, I think you're guaranteed on most flashes that they will go as wide as possible, irrespective of how they are otherwise set up. I used this softbox in one side of the setup. The other side I didn't have a softbox and I didn't care to build one more. So I just used an umbrella and shot through that, and it also works fine. It has the same effect that the light that hits the umbrella is sort of spread out, and hence the surface of your light source simply becomes bigger. It's as simple as that. So a big light source and very, very close to the subject, then you get the softest possible light for your shoot. You may have guessed that in this setup I had my flashes off camera, so I needed a trigger. And the beautiful thing about the Godox here that I'm using, this is the V860 Mark II. The beautiful thing about this setup is that the protocol between the trigger and the flash is the same, meaning that as long as I have a trigger that fits the camera I'm using, I can actually use a flash that, when it's mounted in the hot shoe on the camera, is designed for Fuji. But this doesn't really matter right now, because I can just fire the flash with a Nikon trigger. They understand each other still, because the protocol between these two is the same. So I really enjoy that, and as I have both Fuji and Sony and Nikon, I have 3 of these triggers, but I only have 1 set of flashes. If you can afford it, I'm not especially an ambassador for Godox, but I will say that if you can afford a flash where you have a lithium battery, that will save you a lot of energy in terms of replacing AAA batteries or carrying a battery pack or whatever. This is so much easier. So if you can afford it, I would highly recommend that. That's all there really is to it. And I think it's a great setup for product shoots. So give it a try. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope this was useful. Let me know in the comments if you have any questions, of course. Otherwise, as always, happy shooting. Take care. Bye-bye.